Introduction to Emergency Medical Care. The first, I think it's first 8 chapters is the preparatory section, right? Section 1, chapters 1 through 8, we're going to talk about all the foundation stuff that people have a tendency to overlook, right? They're like, oh, that's not important. Chapters 1 through 8 is an entire section of your NREMT test, right? So they come back and recall stuff you're going to be covering week 1 and week 2 that we're going to compile 14 other weeks on top, and you're going to have to recall this stuff, right? So this stuff is important. It might seem dumb, okay? But I encourage you, this is some pretty important stuff. There is red in this PowerPoint, so there will be some cues of what's important and what's not. Make sense? All right. So by the end of this class, here are the 10 things that you'll know as an EMT, right? The one big one, and we're going to talk about it in chapters 9 and 10, is you're going to know the difference between respiratory distress and respiratory failure. One of those is just a problem, and one of those is something critical. Okay, distress is I'm short of breath. Respiratory failure would be somebody who's barely breathing or you think is going to end up being pretty critical, right? Number 2, what does it say, Brandon? Be nice, right? We're going to talk a lot about how to be nice to people. If you don't like people, you are in the wrong business, right? You're going to encounter people that you wouldn't normally encounter, right? You're going to walk into living conditions that you wouldn't wish upon your worst enemy, right? You don't treat them any differently, okay? I've encountered all the way from very, very, very poor individuals to people who are pretty well off, right? Doesn't change my care. I told you about Gary working for the president, all the way to working in an agency that a lot of his area was low income, and he will tell you he would take the low income population over the rich people of this country any day of the week. Okay? So, be nice, right? We're going to talk more about that. Number 3, oxygen is no longer the wonder drug, right? Oxygen used to be this, well, we gave you oxygen, why aren't you getting better? You can actually cause more damage and make problems worse with oxygen, right? It's one of the things we're starting to realize. Number 4, you're not going to know everything in the beginning, and that's totally fine with us, right? I'm here for the next 33 days to teach you how to know everything, right? Just going to give you what I know, and that's everything, so therefore you know everything, right? Medical patients, you will find out most of what you need to know from the history. Medical is the more frustrating one, okay? You usually have to bait people to tell you stuff. I've had patients, I say, any history of medical conditions? Nope. They're like, perfect. So you have nothing wrong with you. They're like, nope. And you're like, okay. So we take them to the hospital, and the doctor goes, how come you haven't been taking your diabetes medication? And the patient's like, oh, I just haven't taken it. And I go, wait a second, time out. Are you diabetic? And they're like, yeah. And you're like, remember that one time, like a half hour ago, when I asked you if you had any medical problems and you said no? Diabetes is a medical condition. Well, I take insulin, so I don't have diabetes. I only have diabetes when I don't take my medicine. That's not the way this works, right? So you have to ask specific questions in some circumstances and broad questions in other circumstances. Sometimes the most important decision you will make is how quickly your patient needs to be to the hospital. I will tell you your critical traumas, patients that you're on scene, they're broken, they're bleeding, they're in and out of consciousness. The very, very best thing for them is a surgeon, right? And however you can safely and time effectively get them to a hospital, that is your most important decision, right? You have to make the choice. Is it faster by helicopter or is it faster by ground, right? Is it faster to wait for a paramedic or is it faster to meet a paramedic between us and a hospital, right? All of those things are going to change on different calls, different circumstances. 7, the primary assessment comes before the secondary assessment. Notice the word primary and secondary. Primary means what? First, okay? Number 8, 2 sets of vital signs tell you a lot more than 1 set. I will tell you that 1 set of vital signs, your very first vital sign tells you nothing when it comes to how critical a patient is, right? And in my opinion, your second set doesn't really tell you a whole lot because your vital signs can change. I wouldn't say drastically. Your vital signs can change a decent amount in a 5 or 10 minute period, even in a healthy person. That third set of vital signs, that tells you a ton. That allows you to compare it to 2 other sets, and you can actually build a trend. Are they getting better? Are they getting worse? Are they staying the same? Okay? Of all the EMS skills, thinking is by far the most important. right? You have to critically think. You have to think outside the box. When we do scenarios, we're going to purposely make you stop doing hands-on and make you talk through stuff, okay? We're going to expect you to know a little bit more than what your textbook expects of you, right? Because the NREMT expects more of you than what the textbook does. No medical or traumatic condition presents exactly like your textbook. Shocking, your patients didn't read your textbook, right? They don't know the words to say to you to make you understand they're having a heart attack. They just know they're having a tingling feeling in their chest. You have to know that's a red flag for a heart attack, right? There's no script for a patient to read. You have to know how you're going to ask questions and how you're going to present it to make it make sense. Does that make sense? I said make sense twice. That was kind of dumb. All right. So this is the progression of this class. This was made by Dan Limmer, who's the author of your textbook, and this really, for one, it's a little bit entertaining to me, as well as I was amazed at how true this really is, right? This is your response to each one of the sections and chapters, and this is pretty much spot on of where I'm at, right? Notice how like halfway through, I start being like, man, and when we get to medical, it starts like speeding up, right? We're going to cover everything you need to know about the heart in an hour and a half, right? One of the most important organs in your entire body. I'm going to give you an hour and a half and go, figure it out. Let's go. We're moving on to the next one. And then it's everything about respiratory. Now it's everything about the brain. Now it's everything about seizures. Oh, now we're on to trauma, which means all your bleeding, your gunshot wounds, your stab wounds, your car accidents, serious safety things. Now we're going to talk about how to deliver babies. Oh, my God, right? Now we're going to talk about how to take care of geriatrics, then how to take care of pediatrics. Now class is over. You're taking the NREMT. Have a good day, right? That's literally how fast, halfway through, takes this violent shove into being done, right? So this is kind of that moment of, oh my God, right? And then usually about this time I start thinking, do I really want to work with some of these students, right? There may be students I'm like, I would really encourage you to work at the fire department. Just kidding, look at this guy. I'll make fun of nurses, I don't mean it. I'll make fun of paramedics, I don't mean it. I'll make fun of District 10. I'll make fun of Valley Fire. I like District 10. They're good people. All right, so how this whole thing began, 1790s, the French began to transport wounded soldiers away from battle, right? Why do we care about that? Because NREMT likes to ask you stupid questions, right? Why do you care about 1790? You don't, right? But the way they'll usually ask it is who's credited with the creation of the medical system? It's the French, right? Now with this, there was no care done whatsoever, right? There was no paramedics, there was no EMTs, there was no tactical medics, there was no PJs, there was no nothing, right? They literally picked someone up by their arms and legs and drugged them off the battlefield, right? That was their quote-unquote transport, okay? As things progressed, Civil War, we didn't see a whole lot except for we started hearing about the American Red Cross, right? But really, treatment didn't change. World War I, we started seeing these volunteer ambulance corporations pop up in the United States. Korea and Vietnam is the drastic change that we saw. This is where we introduced MASH units, which were doing medical treatments and procedures in the field, right? And this is the first time we really started seeing helicopter transport. Okay? We all know now a lot of big cities have agencies in their city, has all progressed from that military style, right? EMS has learned a ton from the military. I would tell you there are leading, guinea pigs, okay? We bring new stuff in EMS and we're like, look at this new tool. The military guys are like, we've been doing that for 10 years. Where have you guys been? Because we're using them as kind of our, does it work, does it not work? Great, it works. That's our evidence base. Let's work through it. Most of the time, way back in the beginning, a lot of the ambulance agencies were operated by hospitals, by fire departments, or believe it or not, from funeral homes, right? The guy to pick up a dead body or a guy to pick up the living body were the same person, right? And what was really weird is there was no care done in these ambulances, quote unquote, right? They literally picked the patient up on a stretcher, stick him in the back of a car or like a hearse, right? Two people would get in the front seat of the passenger seat and drive him to the hospital. There was no care done whatsoever. There was no requirements. You could just create an ambulance company and be an ambulance company. No crew training, no medical training, no education, no nothing, right? Obviously, as you can tell, this is not the most intelligent way to operate this. Thank God it's changed, okay? So 1966 is pretty much the moment we've credited the modern EMS system. Modern EMS system, 1966. Okay? So with that, we had the development of the Department of Transportation. Now, in your textbook, when you review this later tonight or tomorrow, you'll read about the Department of Transportation was in charge of the EMS system initially. What they had is what's called the White Paper Act, right? It was this research that was done that said statistically the leading killer of people is trauma, and the most common trauma is car accidents. So therefore, DOT, it's your job to fix that, right? The White Paper Act was titled Trauma, the Neglected Disease of Concern, right? So it was just research in this study, so we said, okay, so let's work on the EMS system. So in 1970, NREMT was created, and NREMT is in charge of the education standards, right? They don't oversee ambulance companies. They don't oversee programs. They just say, this is the curriculum that you have to test on, right? This is who I follow, okay? This is the first time I'll tell you, this is not a Spokane County EMT class. This is not a Spokane County program. This is not a Washington State EMT class. This is not a Pacific Northwest EMT class. This is a national EMT class, right? You're going to learn stuff in this class that maybe you can't do at District 10, or maybe you can't do in Stevens County, maybe you can't do at Deer Park Ambulance, you can't do at AMR. Nationally, I have to teach you that procedure. Does that make sense? So this is the national standard of EMTs and education. 1973, and this isn't horribly important because we're going to talk about the 10 things this came with, but the National Emergency Medical Services Systems Act was passed by Congress, and there was these 10 regulations, right? Click. Thank you. Move on. Come on. Don't make me angry. Perfect. So, first thing they came up with is regulation and policy. They basically said each state has to have their own laws and policies and regulations that allow an EMS system to work, right? Each state absolutely has to have a system built for EMS resources, okay? The next one is they had to have a centralized coordination of EMS treatment and transport resources. They had to have a branch of Department of Health that oversaw just EMS, right? Here in Washington State, or here in Spokane, we have an EMS council that oversees the city and the county, and then we have a statewide council that oversees that. If you mess up here in the city, you would be reviewed by the EMS council as well as the state council, right? So you have to have human resources and training, so you have to make sure that we're all getting the same education. So what they did is, okay, we're going to outline what you have to be an instructor, because in order to have a class, you've got to start with the instructors, right? So they laid out all these prerequisites and so on. You got to have X amount of years in the job. You got to take this class. You got to know how to teach to adults, stuff along those lines, to make sure that we're all trained where we belong, and then say, okay, you as instructors have to make sure everyone's are trained and set to minimum standards, right? They looked at transportation and said, you have to have a safe and reliable way to get patients to and from the hospital, right? You can no longer transport in the back of pickup trucks, right? Not going to happen, right? Got to be an ambulance, got to have 4 wheels, has to operate, has to be safe, has to pass DOT weight laws and weight distribution and all that stuff. Has to be licensed as an ambulance. That's all taken care of for transportation. Facilities, now the downfall is like here in Spokane, how many hospitals do I have to choose from? You may know? What's that? 4, right? Sacred Heart, Deaconess, Holy Family, Valley Hospital. The VA is unique. If they're non-critical, they are a vet, and we call ahead and ask for permission, they will take an ambulance patient. But they're not an emergency room, right? The new one that's popped up is this idea of the standalone ER that's going on the north side of Spokane. That is an ER with no admit for Deaconess, right? We now, in the last council meeting, had to go through and set standards of what can you transport to the standalone ER and what you cannot go there. If they're bleeding or dying from trauma, we cannot stop there. It's not a hospital, right? So they had to set standards of where you're going to go, what hospital you're going to choose. Each one of our hospitals might have a specialty, or there's a level system that we'll talk about here in a second, that are levels of care, and so we have to know those levels, right? The next thing that the NHTSA came out with is this communication system. There has to be a way for ambulances to talk to each other, for a dispatcher to talk to your ambulances, for your ambulances to talk to a hospital, and your hospital to talk to hospitals. So one of the things that they have is what's called the HERE system. Go ahead, Adam.
Say you're up north in my area, as you always are. What about if the closest is Chihuahua?
So this one is so this one has kind of a caveat. The rule of thumb is you take them to the best level of facility within 30 minutes. At 31 minutes, you go to the nearest hospital, right? So if I'm way out in the middle of Tum Tum and my patient is critical and Sacred Heart is 35 minutes away, but St. Joe's Chihuahua is only 20 minutes away, I'm going to Chihuahua, right? Because a controlled environment is still better than in the back of my ambulance, right? We always make the joke that, that's what separates EMS from hospital or pre-hospital from hospitals are controlled environments. Very true, right? On a scene, I can't control the heat, I can't control the weather, I can't control the light, I can't control any of that. My back of my ambulance is not a controlled environment, right? Because my life and your patient's life is in the hands of the person driving. And they're at the whim of traffic, right? So trying to get them to a hospital is still the best thing, just maybe not the highest level. Make sense? So the HERE system is a channel that we talk to the hospitals in our ambulances. 10 minutes away from a hospital, I turn to the HERE system. I say, Holy Family Hospital, Deer Park Ambulance, we're 5 minutes away from a facility. Here's what's wrong, blah, blah, blah. The HERE system is the same frequency nationwide. Now, it's non-repeated, which means that it does not go much farther than a little bit over line of sight, right? Because if that was the case, if it was repeated, you'd be getting radio frequencies from Lincoln County Hospital and all that stuff, right? So it's non-repeated. So here in town, from Wandamere, I can talk to Valley, I can talk to Sacred Heart, I can talk to Deaconess, I can talk to Holy Family, right? If I'm in Tum Tum, I can't talk to any hospitals. It just doesn't work. The nice thing is, let's say something like Katrina or 9/11 happened, and FEMA says it's a natural disaster or a terrorist attack, and we want to bring resources from Spokane, Washington, and I want you to go to New York City and work in the EMS system. When I roll into New York City, I turn to the HERE system and tell the hospital we're there, and every ambulance in that city just can hear us. So it allows us to stay all on that same page, right? It's the same operating channel throughout the country. So 7, you had to have a public information and education, okay? You needed to have a standard to set for EMS to have some role in public education, right? Fire departments are a little bit better at this than the EMS agencies, right? You guys go and teach, smoke detectors. You guys teach stop, drop, and roll. You teach making an evacuation plan for your families. I know agencies that put on their SCBAs and their turnouts and show kids that we're not scary, we're not the bad guys, all that stuff. The ambulance side tend to do more of like public vaccination programs or free blood pressure checks or, car seat checks or stuff along those lines. But you had to have some grounds for injury prevention or some sort of public education. Injury prevention is like, helmet safety for kids or wearing your seatbelts or making sure that parents that have pools, they've got locks on their gates and stuff along those lines, right? So the two terms, in my opinion, the textbook does a really poor of defining is medical direction and a medical director, okay? Every agency, as long as they have EMTs, has a medical director, okay? The medical director has to be a physician, okay? This medical director is accountable for everything that happens. If I do something wrong that kills a patient, my medical director gets sued. We are operating, you as EMTs will be operating under a physician's license, which is why they play such a huge role in protocols and what you do, right? District 10, you got Dr. Haggerty. He does trainings. He oversees your reports in some circumstances. Deer Park Ambulance, we have Dr. Hill. Looks at our reports, makes sure we're doing our protocols like we're supposed to, because if we screw up, he loses his physician license and loses family and house and all that stuff, right? That's a director. Medical direction is who you're going to call if you want to give a medication. And medical direction is defined as either A, the hospital you're transporting to, or the nearest physician at a hospital. So let's say your protocols say, as an EMT, you have to call medical direction to give nitroglycerin. And you were in Chewelah, you would call Chewelah Hospital and say, can I please speak to a physician? The physician hops on the phone and says, this is Dr. Boone, how can I help you? You say, Dr. Boone, my name is Sean Pitts, I work for Deer Park Ambulance, I'm an EMT, I got a patient here with chest pain. I am asking for permission for you to give me direction to give nitroglycerin for this reason, and this reason. He says, great, give it. And you say, great, I'm just confirming, give 0.4 milligrams of nitroglycerin to that patient and that your name is Dr. Boone. He says, yep, and you say, great, you write that down, and that's your medical direction, okay? It's very rare that to give a drug, you pick up the phone and call your medical director, right? Dr. Hill does not on my phone call at 3 in the morning when I say, hey, bro, it's Sean, can I give nitro, right? We call a hospital. Now, our medical director is a physician at Sacred Heart, so there might be a case where he's on as a doctor and I'm talking to him, but they're usually two different people. Does that make sense? You know the difference between director and direction, okay? That is important. So we have this trauma system, right? We talk about triage, we talk about transport, we talk about treatment. So we made this level system and basically said we're going to give hospital trauma ratings, and that's going to give us some guidelines of where we take patients to. So here in Spokane, let's go this first. So there's a level 1 trauma center, a level 2 trauma center, a level 3 trauma center, a level 4 trauma center, a level 5 trauma center. Level 5 is the bottom. Level 1 is the very best trauma hospital that you can possibly get. Okay? Anybody know where the nearest level 1 is? Harborview, right? So here in Spokane, we have a level 2, which is Sacred Heart. Okay? Locally, that's the very best trauma hospital we can go. So if we have a patient who's totally messed up, what's going to happen is we take them either by ambulance or by air. They go to Sacred Heart. They get stabilized. Sacred Heart calls Harborview and says, here's what we got. What can you do? Do you want it? If they say yes, they go by ambulance to an airport, whether it's SIA or it's Phelps Field, and some flight company flies them over the mountains and go take them to Harborview, right? So we have level 2. Sacred Heart is our only level 2 trauma center. Level 3, we have Deaconess, right? Our level 4s, and in some cases they talk about level 2s with Holy Family and Valley. We're kind of trying to get the idea if they actually are. Level 3, let's go with Deke. Level 4, you got Valley and you got Holy Family. Our level 5s are like St. Joe Chewelah or Newport Hospital or Colville Hospital, one of those, right? What they don't have is they don't have a physician on staff at all times. They have a PA who's there 24/7 and a doctor who's usually within about 30 minutes on call, but they don't have a doctor there at all times, right? There will be times, and I've been there, where you have a messed up patient who's totally, they're broken, they're bleeding, they're whatever, and we transport that patient to the PA who's in the ER at St. Joe's. And you roll in the door, dragging body parts, and go, there you go, and their eyes go, oh my God, get me a helicopter, get me someone to get it out of here, right? Because that might be the nearest facility for the next hour, depending on circumstances, right? So that's how we have to determine what hospital we're going to. Evaluation, they wanted a QI, QA, which is basically quality assurance, right? So the way it works is you randomly pull reports and black out all the HIPAA information and basically read through it and say, are we doing what's right for our patients? Here in Spokane County, what will happen is, let's say a hospital gets a patient who they feel shouldn't have gone to Holy Family. Holy Family is like, this patient was having an active heart attack. They had all the signs and symptoms that said they're having a heart attack. We should not have got this patient. They should have gone to Sacred Heart. So they send that to our EMS council, who's built up by a couple different agencies throughout the area, and the council will then look at the circumstances and say, okay, so AMR transported it, and the initial and they're reading our reports as EMS, right? And they're saying it says here it's a 45-year-old male complaining of chest pain and assessment, all this stuff, and then we're like, why did they take them to Holy Family? It's very, very clear this patient should have gone to Sacred Heart. So they look at a couple things. One, does our protocols inaccurately tell us what to do, right? So they give us the benefit of the doubt. Are we just following the wrong guideline? If it's a protocol problem, they fix the protocol and make sure it never happens again. If it's an agency policy problem, they fix it and make sure it never happens again. If it's your fault as an EMS provider, you might get called in and them say, why did you take that patient to Sacred Heart? Or why did you take him to Holy Family? And you might say, hey, doc, we were 55 minutes away from Holy Family, and my patient became unstable, and I was afraid they were going to go into cardiac arrest, so I went to Holy Family. And the doctor would go, nice work, right? There's a whole system to find out why we do the things that we do to make sure that we're doing things correctly at all times. Does that make sense? That's QI or QA. So here's the components of the EMS system. This is usually the stuff that people don't realize in the real world, right? I will tell you that most of the world are totally oblivious to what you just got yourself into, right? You're either all paramedics or you're all ambulance drivers, right? No matter what you do for a living. You walk in the house, they'll call you an ambulance driver. They'll call you a paramedic. They say you're just a firefighter. You know, we had patients when I worked for the fire department. They called 911 because they're having chest pain. The fire department walks in the door and they go, why are you here? I called an ambulance. Well, ma'am, when you call 911, we're medically trained. We are closer, so they sent us to work with the ambulance company. They're like, that's crazy. I know. Educate them, right? Tell them how the system works and work through that. We have dispatchers, right? Here in our area, we're very, very lucky to have what's called an emergency medical dispatcher. This is actually a class to be a level of care, right? This allows them to actually give instructions over the phone that could save someone's life before we even get there, right? We're very, very lucky in this area to have EMDs. We have responders. We'll talk about the different levels of care. Of course, you have emergency departments and hospitals and specialty centers and so on. Here in Spokane, the confusing thing, Sacred Heart is a level 2 trauma center, but they're a level 1 pediatric trauma center, right? So all of our pediatric trauma goes to Sacred Heart. We bypass Holy Family. We don't go to Deaconess. Sacred Heart is also a level 1 cardiac center. All of our patients that we feel are having a massive heart attack go to Sacred Heart. We would bypass Holy Family because they don't have a cath lab, right? So there are these specialty centers where you might be going because the patient fits certain criteria. Why is this thing no longer working? I'm really angry if I have to go stand next to this computer. Yeah, done that before. That's cool. Class gets canceled and stuff breaks. Oh, too bad. All right. So here's basically how the EMS system operates, right? You have to have a patient, so something bad happens. Some bystander. I love how they flip the roles here, right? The 25-year-old is injured, and then 85-year-old is calling 911. That person calls 911 and talks to a dispatcher. Dispatcher asks you a bunch of questions, and then you get first responders, right, which could be, depending on where you are, could be a laundry list of people. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Then you get ambulance personnel, okay? Then they take you to a hospital. That hospital then eventually go into allied health staff, specialty centers, PT, OT, stuff along those lines. So notice how this is in red, really, really important. So in the olden days, right, like the 90s, okay, you used to call 911, and in some cases, as long as you weren't using a cell phone, it would provide the dispatcher with a callback number, right? That is what's called enhanced 911, okay? Landline phones, those of you who don't know what this used to be a phone that attached to a wall that had a cool cord, right? If mom couldn't find you, she found the cord and went and found the cord that was wrapped around like 9 different pieces of furniture and found where you were hiding, right? It was a miserable, miserable time in this world. Be glad you don't know what I'm talking about, right? So now when you call 911, your phone goes into emergency mode and provides GPS coordinates to the dispatcher, which has done really impressive stuff when it comes to response. The downfall is sometimes that can be slightly to majorly misleading, right? I've been told you're at Division in Francis and the car wreck is at Wellesley in Division, right? That's no big deal. We had a case a couple years ago of a 21-year-old drowned in a lake where they sent the Cheney Fire Department for a lake in Cheney initially because that's where the GPS pinged them. They were 10 minutes outside of Deer Park, right? The only way was we were listening to this dispatch, and they were describing a lake that the crew happened to know extremely well, right? And as we picked up the phone to tell them they were wrong, the dispatcher figured it out, right? Sometimes GPS is great. Sometimes it's not very much fun, okay? So it's nice when it works like it's supposed to. So I talked about EMDs, right? It's a certification that is required in some jurisdictions like it is here, right? The fire dispatchers here and the ambulance dispatchers here are EMDs, okay? Again, that certification allows you to provide instructions to callers on how to provide emergency care, how to do CPR over the phone. Do you have any aspirin in your house? If so, make sure they don't have an allergy, make sure they don't have any active bleeding, and give them aspirin because they're having chest pain, right? Those are the things they can do. They teach them how to do a stroke assessment over the phone to give us better instructions. That's the whole purpose of them. Holy cow, that's a dispatch center. So critical decision making, it's an important part, right? You're going to take all this stuff and you're going to gather it, and you're going to have these time critical decisions. Now, every single call you go on is not going to be time critical, right? If you're looking for the nonstop adrenaline on every single call, you're in the wrong business, right? It's always that joke of it's like 1,000 calls of the most boring part of your life and one call like your pants are on fire, right? And that one call will usually buy you time to take 1,000 more calls that are really, really boring, right? A little adrenaline will keep you in this job for a long time, right? About the time you're like, well, that was boring. This is just getting old. Something happens, right? You have to find a way to care for people because you can turn those boring calls into a pretty good learning experience and utilize that to motivate you to stay in EMS, right? It'll amaze you what will actually intrigue you to be here. So here's the level of EMS training, right? Some stuff has changed, okay? Some of you might know the term EMT-Basic, okay? There is nothing basic about the job you're going to do, okay? We got rid of that term. We just call you EMTs, okay? So the first one is we used to call first responders. Now, EMRs have about a 40-hour class. We teach them CPR. We teach them basic first aid, okay? EMTs, the parameter is about 150 to 180 hours, or 190 hours, right? IHS sits kind of on the high end of that, okay? You learn oxygen administration. We give you a couple of drugs. We talk about assessments. We talk about AED use. We talk about some more questioning and patient assessments. Advanced EMT, we used to call EMT eyes or EMT Intermediates, right? This is what I am. Once you've been an EMT for a year, you can come back and take the advanced EMT program. It's the same length as your EMT class, okay? About 3.5 months. What you gain, IVs is the big one, right? You gain IVs, you get a couple more drugs, and almost all of our drugs, as advanced EMTs, we don't have to call medical direction where you would have to, right? So it's one of the bigger things you gain is, in fact, I can't think of anything that I have to call and say, hey, doc, can I give nitro? You have to ask for permission. I just have standing protocols that allow me to do it, right? Paramedic is the jump, right? We used to call them EMT paramedics, and now we just call them paramedics, okay? This is like the top. Don't ever tell them that. But this is like the top of the EMS world, right? Different programs have different standards. Ours is accelerated. We ask that you have 3 years of EMS experience, okay? You can skip advanced EMT for most places. You don't have to be an advanced. You can go right from an EMT to a paramedic. You don't even have to be an advanced, okay? Our program, 3 years of experience. We have a written exam, a practical exam, and an interview process to accept you into the program. It's 6 months didactic, right? 6 months of classroom. And that is Monday through Wednesday, 9 in the morning till 5:30 at night, every single day, with about 25 to 40 hours of homework outside of those 3 days, okay? Once you're done with that, we then put you in a hospital for about 120 hours in about a month and a half. And then after that, we put you 160 hours on an ambulance for the month or so after that, right? Start to finish, most of our students are doing it in 12 months, right? It's accelerated, it's fast-paced. This opens the doors for advanced airways, invasive procedures, drugs, narcotics, medications. They can give you drugs that'll make you stop breathing, that will paralyze you and take out your memory so you forgot we did it to you, right? Sketchy. Stay away from paramedics, right? They're dangerous. I'm kind of kidding. Roles and responsibilities of the EMT. What is in red up there? Number one priority is yourself. This is a very, very selfish job, right? If you're not safe, stay away from it. Okay? Now, do you think there will be circumstances that you might choose to jeopardize your own safety for the sake of somebody else's life? What do you think? Brandon, what'd you say? Yeah. Right? There might be a unique circumstance where you do it. Right? There was a case in Seattle not that long ago of a little boy who was in a pool, face down. I think he was 3 years old, drowned. Fire showed up. Their agency policy is you do not get in the water for any reason. Right? They showed up. EMT hopped in the water, pulled the boy's body out, did CPR, saved his life. Got fired the very next day. Right? They were like, you are told not to get in the water. And the paramedic was like, I wasn't going to let him lay there and die. You're right. Guess what? He still has a job. Right? There might be that unique circumstance where you make that choice. I'm going to put myself at risk. I doubt there's any of you in this room who's not willing to risk your life for somebody else. Right? Everyone always looks at that and be like, okay, that's law enforcement. Is EMS really that dangerous? In unique circumstances, this can get pretty sketchy. Okay? There was just a case where a guy was standing outside of a Detroit hospital, transported a patient, standing outside next to his ambulance smoking a cigarette. Car drove by and opened fire. Why? We don't know. Right? Thankfully, he didn't get shot. Right? There are times in this job where stuff will get sketchy. Okay? Here's the list of priorities. You, your partner, your patient, everywhere else, or everyone else in exactly that order. You come first, your partner comes second, your patient comes third, bystanders come fourth. Okay? Patient assessment is going to be important. Patient care, lifting and moving. What do you think is the number one reason, non-lethally, that ends EMS career? Back, neck, shoulders, knees. And what is almost always the cause? Lifting and moving somebody. Right? You flash back about 20 years, average weight of patients was probably 150 to 160. I can't remember the last time I picked somebody up in an ambulance that weighed 150 or 160. Right? We had a guy in Deer Park who was 790 pounds. We went on him 3 and 4 times a week. Right? Average weight of most patients, you're probably looking at 220 to 230. That's average. Right? We have the far end on both sides of that. Right? So being able to do this job is pretty important. What is the word patient advocacy, or words? What does that mean? Someone tell me. You don't have to raise your hand, just say it. Take a shot in the dark. Anthony, you look like you want to try. No, you're District 10, you don't know what that means. Just kidding, stop it. What do you think it means? Patient means someone you're taking care of. What does advocacy mean? What does an advocate mean? Say again? Okay, I like defending them, but think about EMS side. Take that same word and apply it to EMS. Say again? Maybe, but we're not the legal side as much. So think of the medical side. How am I going to be an advocate to somebody? There you go. Provide the very best care to somebody, right? The golden rule applies to EMS, okay? And the golden rule is treat others as you would expect to be treated. I don't care how you treat me, right? I expect you to take care of somebody like you would want your grandmother or your mother or your sister or your daughter or your brother, right? To me, that's more important than how you treat me, right? That's what I'm going to grade all of you on at the end of this class. Do I want you taking care of my wife and daughter? If the answer is no, I will find a way to not pass you, right? It sounds horrible, right? But that's the truth of it. I live in this city, right? We teach ACLS at Sacred Heart, and we tell the nurses all the time, we expect you to know what you're doing because this is Sacred Heart. If someone's messed up, if my family's messed up, this is the hospital they're coming to. And I want you to take care of my family the very best you can, right? That's super important to us. Physical traits of a good EMT, able to lift and carry equipment and patients up to 125 pounds, right? Doesn't seem like, it seems like a big number. It's not that bad. Adrenaline helps you a lot, right? No kidding, had a car wreck, but he was ejected out the front windshield. There was this giant boulder that she was laying like up against, and this little EMT, like 5'2", 96 pounds, came off the ambulance. 3 of us from Stevens County are working, trying to get this lady taken care of, and I said something with the rock, and she went woof and rolled the rock over, and I was like, my God, that was the size of your ambulance, right? And she's like, it wasn't that bad. My God, right? I'm just kidding. Okay? So adrenaline plays a pretty big role in 125 pounds, right? This does not necessarily mean you have to carry it all by yourself, right? Usually you have help, okay? Good eyesight. How many of you wear glasses or contacts? Exactly, right? That's fine if you can, I always love like driving code, and then you're like, I don't have my glasses on, right? And your partner's like, pull over. What? I can see the line. Awareness of problems with color vision, yeah, whatever. Good communication skills, oral and written, that's pretty important, right? I've worked with the EMTs, and I'm not like, we're lumping them in and be like, well, they were homeschooled and they're socially awkward, and I don't care, right? As long as you can talk to patients, that's the most important. If you are dead silent in the entire shift and never saying a single word, I don't care. When you get in the back of an ambulance, you should have to be able to talk to a patient, right? You're going to have conversations with people, so you're going to have to kind of work through that. How many of you are like shy, like secluded, quiet people? We'll fix it. Don't raise your hand. No one did. You're all liars. Personal traits, pleasant, sincere, cooperative, resourceful, right? All those things are important. Exactly how you should look if you were a guy, right? Picture perfect EMT. Nicely dressed, nice haircut, looks like he's physically fit, right? Walking with great body posture, sunny outside, whatever. Personal traits, continued self-starter, okay? So I hate the second one, right? I think this is garbage. And when we talk about PTSD and suicide and depression in EMS, you're going to find out my true opinions of all of that. It's something that I'm taking upon myself to beef up in this program, right? Suicide in EMS is increasing faster than suicides in the military, right? We've had at least one to two per week for the last 2 years of EMS providers killing themselves. A week ago, a kid came back from bed call, 18-year-old kid, took a fire hose, hung himself from the rafters of his fire station, right? A month ago, a guy took a gun to his head and blew his head off behind the fire station, right? Literally, like, drastic change that literally we're like, what happened, right? Nothing's changed. We're still seeing the same calls. When I took an EMT class, it was if a call bothered you, either get out or grow up, right? That is a pretty poor interpretation of how stuff's going to bother you. Do you think stuff's going to bother you? It's gonna, right? And I'm sure if I asked you what call do you think will bother you, you all will put a call in your head, right? You're right. That call will probably bother you. The ones that mess you up is the ones you don't see coming, right? It's the 95-year-old cardiac arrest that, for whatever reason, the daughter was overly concerned and begged you to not stop CPR, and you had to have that conversation and say, we're done. I'm very, very sorry for your loss. We can no longer do CPR. And she will beg you to continue, and you have to stop, right? That may not be a call that pops in your head. Everyone always thinks kids or someone you know or a coworker. That may not be the call, right? We'll talk about emotions. I think it's on Thursday. We'll talk about emotions. We'll talk about how to handle them. We'll talk about stress relief because we're beefing that up and telling people, look, you've got to deal with this stuff or it will literally eat you alive, right? Literally to the point where you'll either A, quit, B, be such an absolute monster that no one wants to work with you and you get fired, or C, you'll commit suicide, right? That's what that stuff does to you. No BS, okay? And we're going to talk about all that good stuff. Neat and clean. Most of us require clean-shaven, hair off your collar, professional appearance, clean your uniform. Some agencies say you have to iron it or something along those lines. It just depends on the circumstances. Good moral character, respectful of others, that's huge, obviously. In control of personal habits, right? If you can't go 15 minutes without a cigarette, you probably don't want to be in EMS, right? It's amazing what people do to get over personal habits in the ambulance, right? We got guys who vape in the front seat or e-cig or whatever. I roll the window out, I don't care, right? But you can't smoke a cigarette. That's pretty ridiculous, right? A good buddy of mine that I used to work with was a chewer, and he used to always spit into a latex, like into a glove, right? I don't care, until the first time that he happened to put that glove on top of the box of unused gloves, and I stuck my hand in the glove full of his chew spit, right? I wanted to kill him, right? Cigarettes, that kind of stuff, and we're going to talk about, like, control your caffeine intake. Most of us are like caffeine fiends. However you can give it to us, let us snort it, shoot it up, whatever, we'll take it, because that's how we stay awake, right? You have to find a way to control conversation and able to communicate properly. Control of conversation is a trait that you're going to learn, right? The example we usually give is you get that like 95-year-old lady, sweet old lady who calls because she's fallen, and you're like, so what kind of medical history do you have? And she's like, when I was 7, I got mumps. And you're like, stop. Let's flash forward 90 years. Let's talk about the last 10. On the way to the hospital, you can tell me all about how you rode a wagon over across the ocean. I don't care, but let's get past that, and let's talk about that later, right? You've got to find a way to get the answers that you want to hear, and then you can hear about all the stuff that is extra. Got to be able to listen. We talked about non-judgmental and fair, right? You're going to come in contact with people who stink, who look funny, who've got deformities, who houses you don't want to. I've been in houses that like almost literally have made me want to throw up, right? And you won't know that until you're gone and I'm out there myself, and I'm like, oh my God, like you're like doing breathing exercise to keep from vomiting, right? Because that shouldn't change the way you treat somebody, right? None of that matters. You're still going to take care of them just like you would normally. All right, so you need to want to be an EMS, right? You're going to go on your ride-along, and you're going to work for agencies, and you might shadow a paramedic who you're like, oh my God, that person is burned out. They hate everything about people. They hate their job. They hate their agency. They treat people like crap. What are they doing here, right? That's what happens when you don't take care of problems and you burn yourself up, right? You have to want to be in this job. I stole this quote from Gary, who I think stole it from somebody else. I don't think he's a genius, but this is pretty touchy and feely for Gary. As a teacher, I can teach you the best medicine in the world, but not even the most brilliant one can give you the things that need to be in your heart, right? You have to want to take care of people, okay? So we're going to play a video. Some of you might have seen this video. It's like my favorite video. It's probably really loud. Please play. Oh, yeah. I love this video. For like Monster Inc. or whatever, the application website. Monster.com, that's what it is. Right? That's the last person you wanted to see. Okay? I got a horror story. We had a new EMT that came from New York that had all these great stories, right? She had been there, done that, whatever, been an EMT for a long time. So one of our very first calls was a cardiac arrest. We show up, guy's dead, nephew's doing CPR, we do CPR on this guy. It's her turn, and I say, hey, hop in and do chest compressions. And she says, I can't do this, and walks off. And I was like, okay, that's never happened before. So me and my partners kind of go back to what we're doing, right? Because she's a trainee. She's a third person on an ambulance. We don't need her. She's there to gain experience. So we get done. We go find her, and we're like, so what happened? She's like, there was just something about it. I just couldn't do it. I got this nauseated feeling. I was like, okay, here's the deal. Take the rest of the shift off. Take a week off, okay? I want you to talk to somebody. If it's me, great. Let's have a phone conversation. We sit down and have coffee, whatever. So came back after a week, and she was like, look, I don't know what it was. You know, I've seen lots of dead people. She had this great, like, this laundry list of, I've seen this a million times. I don't know why it bothered me, whatever. I said, okay, great. I said, you have to understand, you as a trainee can walk away from a scene, and it doesn't hurt me in any way, shape, or form. But if you're here as an EMT, as my partner, and you walk away, I am hosed, right? Because now I lost my only partner. So I said, take a couple of days and understand that if you're coming back, you need to be able to do this job. She came back and said, I got this. I said, perfect. This was between you, I, and my partner. No one else knows about this. We're not going to talk about it. No big deal, right? Very next call out of the chute, cardiac arrest, right? So all the way to the call, we're like, okay. And she's like, I'm fine. I've done this a million times. I've seen gunshots and blown up people and burns and all, like, again, all these stories. We show up, walk in the door. I said, okay, great. You do CPR first. And she goes, can't do it, and walked out of the room. And I was like, right? So we did our whole thing. I walked back and I said, you're fired, right? Sorry. If that happens to you, you're just not meant to be in this job, right? Make a decision. You see something bad, reflect on it, okay? Was it isolated to this? Was it just something that bothered me? Talk about it. Talk to somebody else, right? You're going to have calls that bother you, okay? Work through that. If you decide not to be an EMS, not a single person is going to make fun of you for that, right? I could tap out of EMS right now, and I guarantee all of my closest friends will be like, we support you, okay? We started this thing on Facebook telling people, right? I'm on social media, and I will tell my EMS friends, you need to make a phone call at 3 a.m. because you had a bad call. Call me, right? A close friend of mine had a bad call because it was somebody that we knew, right? A firefighter who was shot and killed by his brother accidentally, and he had to deal with family, and the very first place he came was my front door, right? We cried together. We talked. We worked through it. 6 months later, he had a problem again, shut up my door. We cried together. We talked through it, and it's going to be a continuous process until they make the choice of they want to stay in this job or they don't, right? Have that support system. If you find someone in this class you get along with, great. You find a family member who's in EMS, awesome. You find a coworker, whatever. I don't care if it's non-EMS or EMS. You've got to have that support system, or you're going to have a call and you're going to think it's just part of the job, and you're going to, they become alcoholics, they turn to drugs, they turn to whatever, and it causes problems, right? That's a huge, huge piece of this. So education, this is not a one and done, right? You don't take your EMT class and like, great, I never have to take a class ever again. You wish, okay? Most agencies have training every single month. District 4 has a training every single week to accommodate different schedules, right? That's called continuing education, okay? So you're going to have requirements of you of certain number of hours that you have to have every single year. Your national certification is a 2-year cycle. Coming out of this class, your national certification will expire in 2 years, right? So in 2018, you'll have to recert. As long as you keep up on continuing education, you never have to take the EMT or the NREMT ever again, right? Never have to take that wonderful test that we're going to get you through. Now, you slack off on your education, and you go to recert and say, I have 10 hours of continuing education. They're going to go, we require 72. And you say, I know, I messed up. And they're going to go take the written all over again. And you're going to call me and go, what can I do? And I'll help you. And then in 2 years, we'll do this all over again. Hopefully I won't be here in 2 years, right? So stay up on your continuing education. There's lots of stuff. There's online stuff. There's in-class stuff. There's conferences. We have 3 conferences in Spokane throughout the year, right? Trauma conferences. We bring people in from all over the country and talk. It's amazing. Go to them. The letters you're looking for are CE or CME, right? Any education class, look for how many CE credits or how many CME credits. Every credit is hour by hour. 1 credit is 1 hour. 12 credits is 12 hours, right? Some of you going to college, you have to ask, but some of your college credits or college courses you can use for hours for your research. If it's, sports medicine or stuff like that, you just got to ask and see if it applies. Does that make sense? Education, read magazine, read blogs, subscribe to these websites. Social media is awesome, right? Like pages like EMS One or EMS World GEMS, J-E-M-S. There's a page called EMTs and Paramedics. The dumbest thing ever, me, an instructor from SEC, and a buddy of mine just started an education page yesterday, right? Because we're bored. We're like, let's do something fun. So today we just started an EMS Facebook page, right? And we're just going to do education stuff. We might do live stuff. We might just do posting of articles from other places or whatever, right? Like that crap on your social media so that you can read and kind of keep current what's going on. Now, you can't go, I spend 480 hours on Facebook every year, and our EMT is not going to count that for hours, right? But use it to educate yourself. A lot of those places will tell you, right? GEMS will say, hey, the EMS Expo, which is like a week-long conference in Las Vegas, they start advertising, right? That's all of your continuing education in one whole swoop, right? And it's in Vegas, right? Worst idea ever. Take a bunch of EMTs, paramedics, and firefighters and put them around bars and casinos and education, right? Go to those kinds of things. Some agencies will pay for you to go, right? Get on with those agencies. They usually don't cover your bar tab if you're even old enough to drink. How many of you are not old enough to drink? That's awesome. We usually have like an end of the class party, right? I don't do anything, 0, right? I don't plan it. I say, hey, if you guys want to go somewhere, I always make the joke that I guess in this case we'll still go to Chuck E. Cheese so that all of you can join us and have pizza and play on the toys and it'll be fun. So different places you can be EMTs, right? You could work for an ambulance company. You could work for a fire department. They have tech rescue teams or search and rescue teams. Spokane County has a volunteer-only search and rescue team. Urban or industrial settings, some places have some, the gold mines up north in Medellin Falls and the other one, I can't think of it, on the Republic side, they have EMTs in the gold mines, right? Goodrich Tires, which is not called Goodrich Tires anymore, what's it called in every height, somebody know? The aerospace. Yeah, UTC, right? They make airplane parts and stuff. They have EMTs in the industrial area in case something happens. So there's different areas. You could be a volunteer, you could be a paid person, you could be a part-time person. There's all over the place. Okay? The one thing that NREMT gives you is this word right here, which is called reciprocity. Okay? You come out of this class, so we're going to work through this entire class. You're going to do your practical skills evaluation with us. Okay? You pass the class with an 80. You pass the skills practical, I give you a course completion. Okay? You take that course completion and you go sign up for the NREMT written exam. They do it at what is a place called Pearson View. The nearest one is on Mullen Road right off of Montgomery. There's one in Post Falls. If you're from out of state, we can look it up and tell you where your nearest one is, right? So you take the written exam and you pass. National says, congratulations, you are a national EMT, right? Most states require you get a state certification as well. So you take your national, and you guys at District 10 go to District 10 and say, hey, I'm nationally certified. They say, great. Because you're with us, we'll sign a piece of paper to tell the state of Washington to just give you a state license. There is no test for Washington State. If you have a national, Washington State gives you a license. Those of you that are not affiliated with somebody, so whoever, right, Vince wants to go work for City Fire. He's got his national, he gets hired with City Fire, goes to City Fire and says, I'm nationally certified. They say, great. They sign the piece of paper, they get it to Washington State gives you an EMT license, right? That's what reciprocity gains you. And it allows you, if you maintain your national certification, it allows you to jump from state to state in most circumstances. You get hired with City Fire, so you're a Washington State EMT as well as national. And you get a job with Northern Lakes Fire in Idaho. You go to Idaho, Idaho says you have to have an Idaho state license, and you say, I've maintained my national. They say, great, here's your Idaho license. Now, if you lose your national, Idaho says you have to get your national back. You go back to national and say, I was a national EMT a year and a half ago. Can I get it back? And they say, nope, take the entire class over and start over, right? Do not lose your national license. You might think you're going to stay in Washington forever because Washington requires it to get an EMT license. They don't require you to maintain it. So here, you can get a national license, get your Washington State license, and then let your national go and just maintain your Washington State license. You get a job in Post Falls, they want your national, right? So kind of keep that stuff in mind. The two states or two areas that I know of that don't take national, if any of you are planning on moving to Hawaii, they don't recognize anything but their own, right? A buddy of mine, advanced EMT from National and Washington State, moved to Hawaii for a job, and they said, go back to being an EMT and start over, take our class, right? Texas is the other one. They do not recognize national. For whatever reason, they want you to take their state class and their state certification. I don't know why. They're all butthurt about it. Quality improvement we talked about. We talked about medical direction, right? Medical direction, they are the ultimate responsibility for patient care, okay? There are two terms that are important on this slide. Standing orders is one of them. Associate the word offline and standing orders, okay? And then below that, somewhere else, write online medical direction, right? So write offline medical direction and then parentheses put standing orders, leave yourself some space, and then online medical direction and leave yourself some space. Okay? So here's the difference. Standing orders are protocols. Okay? Washington State says if you're an EMT and you feel the patient has difficulty breathing, oxygen saturations that are less than 94%, you can give oxygen and you don't have to call medical direction. That's offline, right? You never had to speak to anybody, right? Not over web chat, not over phone, not over anything, right? You have standing orders that say you can give this drug if you encounter this circumstance. Now, online is like nitroglycerin like I talked about, right? Your protocols tell you you can give nitro after speaking to a physician. So you call the physician and say, I'm Sean, I'm with Deer Park Ambulance, I want to give nitro, here's why. He says, great, give it. That's online. Online is anytime you are speaking, whether it's through video or through telephone or through radio, to a doctor or through somebody that's telling you directions. Okay? Offline and online. Do not forget these two. Very important for the rest of this class. Make sense to everybody? Everybody grasp that? Whoops. EMS role in public education. Now, we do stuff that's organized, like blood pressure checks and vaccination clinics and stuff along those lines. We also do some stuff that's kind of impromptu, right? I walk into a house for a lady who's fallen down, and we walk in the door, and the rug's kind of displaced. And I say, what happened? She says, I was walking across the hall, and I slipped and fell on this rug. So I take the rug and put it on the hardwood floor and move it and realize that it's slippery, right? I might say, here's what I recommend. Either A, get rid of the rug, or B, go to the store and get one of those foam pads that doesn't allow this to slip, right? That's public education. Or, you know, we're going to a patient for difficulty breathing, and they're not that critical, and we realize there's a kid who's sticking, you know, pennies in a light socket, and you say, you probably want to child-proof your house, right? That's the impromptu stuff that we do, right? Or there's the organized stuff where we're actually doing, you know, drowning prevention, helmet awareness, or something along those lines. So what do you think research plays in EMS? How do we use research? What do you think? Say again? So medical history. What else? Research in the broader aspect, not like one patient, but what works and what doesn't, right? EMS is evidence-based in everything we do, right? I cannot go to a medical director and say, look, here's the deal. I think that EMTs should be allowed to start IVs. And he'll go, I don't care what you think. Now, if I go to him and say, it is scientifically proven that if we get EMT IV certified, we teach them a course, we teach them about anatomy and physiology, we teach them about dangers, we teach them about pros and cons. It's proven that if a patient gets IV solution 5 minutes faster because of an EMS provider, they will most likely survive a traumatic event. And I can say, here's this article and this research and this article and this research. They'll go, it's got evidence, it's got a hypothesis, it's got the research, it's proven to work, let's change it. That's how EMS works, which is why EMS only changes drastically about every 5 years, because that's how long it takes to build all of this research, right? When I took my EMT class 10 years ago, right, tourniquets were the worst thing in the world, right? We were told if you put a tourniquet on someone's body, they will lose their limb. You will cause that limb to die, and they will amputate it, right? Now, the military is like, you guys are stupid. We're going to keep using tourniquets, right? So the military used tourniquets, and we started to see this increase in survivable wounds in the military, right? Afghanistan, Iraq, all these things. So EMS went back and said, we want you to do a survey and find out how many limbs have been lost because of tourniquets. I want you to go back as far as you can. So the military went back to Vietnam and said, okay, from Vietnam to 2013, do you know how many limbs were lost because of tourniquets? Think of a number. Vietnam to 2013. How many limbs were lost because of tourniquets? 0. Right? And they went, here's your numbers, you idiots. And EMS was like, let's start using tourniquets, right? And sure enough, we do tourniquets as like a second line now. Where before it was like, don't think about it, don't touch it, don't picture it in your head, it'll kill them, right? Now we're just like tourniquet, 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 right? That's how EMS works. That's why CPR changes every 5 years. American Heart Association takes the numbers, find out what works and what doesn't and what doctors have found, and then implement it, right? That's how this whole process works. The good news, right, your textbook is 2015 guidelines. It's a brand new textbook. You're the second class to ever use this textbook. This is it right now, which is nice because normally they're on a 5-year cycle, which means by year 5, I'm saying a lot of stuff like, we do something different now, we do something different now, we do something different now. Because we changed it in the EMS, but the textbook haven't been published to reflect those changes, right? This is the guidelines. Your textbook has the exact information your NREMT is testing.